When you want to control a population, you need more than just propaganda, and more than political power. You need to use fear. From Ivan the Terrible's elite assassins to the notorious Iranian intelligence services, here are 10 brutal secret police forces. Kempeitai was the secret police of Imperial Japan. It operated from 1881 to 1945 and reached its murderous peak during the Second World War. They were responsible for psychological operations, counterintelligence, and propaganda. They were also in control of the notorious Unit 731, a research facility now known for brutal human experimentation. Thousands of Chinese test subjects were at the mercy of the Kempeitai. Their limbs were amputated and then sewn back onto them, or they were injected with deadly diseases. Many had their vital organs removed and were exposed to the plague. Even children were operated on without anesthetic. These experiments were done in secret, but the Kempeitai were well known. They once beheaded the editor of an anti-Japanese newspaper and tied his head to a lamppost. It is thought that they killed between 20 and 50,000 civilians in Singapore alone. Their justification for this was that they were anti-Japanese operatives, but almost anything could lead to people being called anti-Japanese. If you had a tattoo, you were anti-Japanese. If you spoke English, you were anti-Japanese. The Oprichna were active in Russia between 1565 and 1572. They were put together by Ivan the Terrible, and just like their founder, they were bloody terrible. Through acts of terror and cruelty, they soon earned the nicknames the Tsar's Dogs and the Children of Darkness. They executed civilians every single day in a bizarre ritual. They would then eat food while Ivan the Terrible sang them songs. Some of their favorite execution methods were boiling people alive and tying their limbs to horses moving in different directions. In 1570, Ivan brought the Oprichna to the city of Novgorod. He thought its population was planning a rebellion, so he went crazy. The Oprichna basically killed everyone they could find and looted local churches. 2 years later, the group was disbanded, and Ivan the Terrible outlawed the mention of their name. In 1382, the Chinese Emperor Hongwu decided he needed secret police. Their initial responsibility was to spy on whoever Hongwu wanted, but their activity soon broadened. In just 3 years, their membership grew from 500 to 14,000. The increase was due to a justified paranoia. Chinese history has seen many power struggles and rebellions. So in the early 1400s, they were given more power than anyone other than the emperor himself, allowing them to interrogate and torture almost anyone. This included imperial family members and military officers. They once executed a General Lang Yu and 40,000 of his associates. Lan Yu is thought to have been innocent and only killed because the Jinwei set him up. As for the 40,000, I have no idea why they were killed. In 1644, they were disbanded after over 260 years of political influence. By that time, they were little more than assassins. The NKVD was Joseph Stalin's secret police. Well known for political violence, they regularly kidnapped, interrogated, and executed Stalin's enemies. They were even more well known for being in charge of the gulags. Gulags were the notorious forced labor camps of the Soviet Union. Anyone could be sent to a gulag, from serious criminals to political prisoners, and their brutal conditions saw the deaths of 10 million people. Stalin used the NKVD to obliterate his political opponents. They would be branded an enemy of the state and swiftly executed. In 1937 and 1938, This fate met around 700,000 people. You never knew when the NKVD would come. They could capture you at work, on a dark night, or even during a wedding. NKVD operation was only ended after the death of Joseph Stalin in 1953. Up until 1979, Iran had its own secret police force called Savak. This was before the 1979 Iranian Revolution, so Iran was not yet a democracy. It was ruled by Shah Mohammad Reza, and he used Savak to maintain his regime. By use of torture and murder, it became Iran's most hated and feared organization. And that's exactly what it was set up for, to discourage rebellion. As the Shah was a Western-friendly capitalist, Savak put much of their resources into confronting communists. And when I say confronting, I mean electrocuting, executing, and exiling. At one point, Savak employed 60,000 agents, many of which trained by the CIA. One of their responsibilities was to spy on Iranian foreign students in Europe. Fast forward to 2016, European countries spy on their own students. Even the Roman Empire had its own secret police. They were called frumentari, and there are just two main sources that tell of their existence, one of which is inscriptions on the gravestones of its members. The empire was large, making frumentari life difficult, as much travelling was required of them. But when they eventually did arrive at a city, they'd be busy causing havoc, unless of course they were paid a massive bribe. When they weren't doing that, or persecuting early Christians, they acted as the emperor's private investigators, spying on anyone with power, or with the potential of gaining power, or with the potential of knowing anyone with the potential of gaining power. They basically spied on everyone in Rome, which is what really led to their downfall. People just protested until the group was disbanded. After the Second World War, Germany was divided into territories administered by different countries, occupied by the Soviet Union. East Germany has been called the theatre of the Cold War, and just like every other communist hellhole, secret police were fully utilized. The Stasi was founded in 1950, and they soon got to work repressing political activity. Possibly their most effective tactic was a policy of maintaining a network of informants. In fact, 1 in 50 East Germans had a connection to the Stasi, which gave them a huge amount of power and ensured all Germans were fearful of them. They knew that in their neighborhood or apartment building, there would be at least one informant. Suspects would be followed and harassed in the street. Their houses would be broken into and trashed. Their phones would be tapped. These strategies were learned from the KGB, as were many others. After the collapse of East Germany, the legacy of the Stasi was discovered to be 111 miles of documents. In Old Cambodia, the term Keeper of the Peace is translated as Santabal. This was the name given to the Khmer Rouge's secret police. The Khmer Rouge ran a brutal regime in Cambodia during the 1970s, orchestrating the Cambodian genocide. They killed 1/4 of the country's population and produced 20,000 mass graves. So as you'll imagine, their secret police were particularly nightmarish. We know fairly little about them, as they made an effort to destroy evidence of their actions. But we know they ran 150 prison camps, which saw torture, execution, and human experimentation. The Gestapo was Nazi Germany's secret state police. Run by SS officers, they would come for their victims on dark nights, giving birth to horrifying stories. Gestapo officers were notorious for their unchallenged power and heartless interrogators. They really were inspired by the Soviet police, employing a vast network of informers. They even encouraged children to inform on their parents, and many did. For these tactics, even the German army hated the Gestapo. There were 5 departments, each focusing on a different area. Department A dealt with their political opponents. Communists and liberals would be dragged away in the middle of the night, tortured until an admission of guilt was extracted, and usually executed. Their dark interrogation methods were brought to light during the Nuremberg trials. There was a certain chemical compound that, if combined with any moisture, would violently explode. A small amount of this would be taped to the hand of a suspect. The way they saw it was that people who lie get nervous, and that nervous people sweat. Sweat would cause the chemical to explode, and the suspect would lose their hand, so it was used as a primitive lie detector. Now, I don't want to end this video on something depressing, so number 1 doesn't actually exist. It's the Thought Police from 1984. 1984 is George Orwell's terrifying dystopian novel in which the government is dominated by one single party who controls its population by punishing thought crime. As the name suggests, thought crime is simply thinking what the government doesn't want you to think. The Thought Police run a false flag operation where they set up a supposed resistance movement. Anyone who joined the movement was arrested by them. That may sound quite bizarre, but it's something the Soviet Union genuinely did in real life. Unlike other secret police forces, the Thought Police attempted to force people to love their ideology. They did so in their torture chamber known as Room 101, where you are exposed to your worst nightmare.
Hey, is that trouble or not? They're not having trouble, are they?
I don't know. I've never seen anything like that.
That's trouble of some kind, George. That's trouble of some kind, isn't it, or not?
There it goes again. I think I'll go in and listen.
Hey, they got troubles.
I'm gonna go listen.